Oh yeah. So one of the best things in Ark's kit, which is often overlooked for a large portion of like a new player's introduction to the class, um, is Ark's ability to float on command in Spectre form. Now, obviously, everybody has access to um, Blink. Okay, Blink has excellent utility. You can either use it to float upwards like this, with very minimal sort of horizontal movement, but you can do some things with this, like if you're in Lucid during lasers, that very slow movement speed of Blink is actually fast enough that you can move away from the lasers as they proc. If you're in Carlos and the left side is active, if it fires a beam and you're currently in Blink, that's also fast enough to move out the way of it. The problem with Blink, and it's only really an issue for Arc because Arc has better options, is it has a cooldown. So it has a cooldown of 20 seconds. So once you use it, you obviously have to wait. Right? And obviously mine's back off cooldown now, so I can use it again. But a 20-second cooldown is still a limitation, even if it feels like it's a small one. Um, One of the other things Blink can be used is just as an air stall, which is really powerful too. A lot of classes have this on very random skills. I believe Pathfinder has one on Triple Impact, for example, where it can press the skill and it will just stop them in midair. Things like this, but very fast repositioning like that. Same as Ho Young's Flames skill is also an air stall if you don't choose not to go up with it afterwards. Rolling Moonsault on Mercedes, also an air stall. But these sorts of things allow you to micro your position really fast, and it's very strong once you get used to it. Because obviously, if you're flash jumping past a boss, um, you can get an idea of where you're going to land, but you also have this weird slidey thing that happens because you have momentum. And it might not also, the situation may have changed. Your location may no longer be safe, so you might need to stop yourself in midair. So, what a lot of people will do once you get comfortable enough is you just sort of do this and stop. Right? So you do an air stall and then you release. You can tap it faster than that. I still held it for a bit to turn, but you can just completely tap it. Arc's float is way better than this. This is easily one of the best floats in the game. Ho Young has a float, Ilium has a float. Both of those floats have very strong limitations in my opinion. Ho Young's float is too fast. You don't often need that level of speed. It feels like you're trading speed for precision a lot of the time. You can reset it in midair, which is cool. Has some niche scenarios, but I don't think you need that much speed. Ilium's float is also pretty good. It's slower, but if you, it doesn't feel like you have super fine control of it, and it also expires quite quickly. Not in Glory Rings, obviously. That's not float. That's something completely different. Um, but Arc's float uh, has, in my opinion, the best balance between speed and precision. In most cases, the patterns in this game across all bosses can be dodged just with this. Like if you predict ahead of it, you can. It's more than enough. You're never going to accidentally fly into something because you're moving too quickly. The micro on it is just incredible. Um, you can do it from the floor, pretty much off a single jump. You can up jump once and then do it. If you need more height before you do it, you basically go off the screen. There's a lot of bosses in this game that don't really have a ceiling, so you can actually go above all patterns. Because there's a lot of bosses in this game that were developed very early on in MapleStory's life, and they were never built around patterns that would target you off screen. Carlos does now, obviously. There's the left and the right things that proc the system, sorry, will target you off screen, and it will hit you off screen. So they've clocked onto it a bit, but it doesn't mean it's any less strong, and it's still an incredibly powerful tool. Um, the way that you do the arc float, you have to be in Spectre mode first of all. Um, you have to jump, you have to be off the ground, and then you have to very quickly press down and then hold the jump button again. And that is honestly it. You just then move up with the directional keys. You can do the arc float without even needing to input a jump key. If you are on another level, so let's say use Carlos or even Lucid for early game players, right? It's not an issue. If you're on a higher platform and you walk off, if you're quick enough by pressing down and space, you'll still float. You don't have to have pressed jump to begin with. It's not a requisite. Um, so it's very flexible in that regard. One of the best things you can do goes back to the secondary effect that I spoke about with Blink, is if you're fast enough with Arc's Float, it is an air stall with no cooldown. So if you're attacking the boss like this, and a pattern is coming and you know you need to move, you can just flash jump across, stall and turn, stall and turn. In some bosses, like Saren, you may have seen it in a couple of videos I've done, but you can do some sort of mobility skill because she tends to stab you really fast, left and right. So playing left and right is very strong in that boss, which is why teleport classes are really strong in that boss. But as an arc, what you can do is come off the floor first before you move. Float, stop, do it again, float, stop, and attack. And you can do all of that still maintaining your uptime on Seren as you're doing it. And this applies to a lot of bosses that do a lot of left to right patterns. But don't think that Arc's float stops in its utility just by being able to do something like this. You know, above Lucid Dragon, for example, or even the Lucid Lasers, or you know, in Will you can go over the tornadoes with the float, for example. In fact, a lot of Will's patterns won't hit you in the air, so even if you're in P2 and you're struggling to keep your moonlight up, float to the sky. You can control exactly what's going to hit you a lot more. In Lotus, when she does the background pattern, you know, the purple beams that land on the floor, they don't have infinite vertical height, so you can float above them. In Damien, when he does the sort of kind of FMA typey thing, which is like the purple clouds, you can go above those with the arc float. I don't know, you can pull it through so many bosses. It's just so useful. Gloom um, when you're in darkness and you're trying to avoid the little giblets that are spawning in, you might find it safer oftentimes. If you haven't timed it right, you can just float for a long period and then use your mobility skills in the sky after the float expires to stay off the ground away from the hands. In Darknell, you can float all the way above his FMA, and if you go to the corners of the map, you can swap rings using your float, and just there's no risk to you whatsoever. In Verisilla, you can float above the clouds and the strings. Okay, there are so many uses, and these are all obviously very defensive. I personally like to max how you can just use attack skills. Go past, air stall, look back towards the boss. And I promise, once you get used to this command, I know that a lot of people will find it quite awkward because it is a bit finicky, pressing down and then float. But once you get used to it, it's incredible. Like, you would wonder how you played the class without it to begin with. This is what I think. This is one of the benefits of the class in general. Your uptime isn't the best, but there's so many kits out there that are worse, and there's so many tools in Arc's kit that are just very good for being able to stay on the boss. It is a 2D game, so most of the stuff is left and right, and being able to go left and right very quickly, like this, is very strong. But yeah, if you weren't sure how to do the arc float, or potentially what it might be used for, maybe this has helped a little bit, give you some ideas, find ways that you can max out what you're doing, your uptime, even just for pure survivability. I hope it helps you there too. Enjoy.